Section 18, Building a Fair Housing Compliance Plan. Arizona Fair Housing 101. The best fair housing complaint is the one that never happens. A few days after discussing fair housing investigations, Sarah walked into David's office carrying a notebook filled with pages of notes. "I've learned a lot about fair housing," she said. "I understand the protected classes. I know how investigations work. I know what happens if someone files a complaint." She paused for a moment. "But I have one more question." David smiled. "I was wondering when you were going to ask it. How do I avoid all of this?" David leaned back in his chair. "That's the question every broker should ask. Fair housing isn't just about responding to complaints. It's about building habits that make complaints far less likely. Consistency is your greatest protection." David drew a simple circle on a sheet of paper. In every fair housing investigation, investigators usually ask one question. Sarah looked curious. "What's that? Did this brokerage treat everyone the same?" Sarah nodded. "That seems simple." "It is. The challenge is doing it consistently. Every buyer should receive the same level of professional service. Every seller should receive the same marketing opportunities. Every tenant should be evaluated using the same rental standards. Every applicant should receive the same information. The more consistent your business practices become," David explained, "the easier it is to demonstrate that everyone was treated fairly. Create standard procedures." Sarah asked, "So where do I start?" David opened the brokerage policy manual. "With procedures. Successful brokerages often use standardized systems for every transaction. They ask every buyer the same qualifying questions. They provide the same disclosures. They use the same showing procedures. They follow the same advertising review process. They document conversations in a consistent manner. When every client experiences the same process," David explained, "fair housing compliance becomes part of your daily routine instead of something you have to think about." Words matter. Sarah remembered one of their earliest conversations. "We talked about advertising." "We did," David replied, "but advertising isn't the only place words matter. Fair housing applies to conversations, emails, text messages, social media posts, video marketing, artificial intelligence tools, printed materials, and every other form of communication with consumers. Before sending any communication, ask yourself one question. Am I describing the property, or am I describing the people who should live there? If the answer focuses on people rather than property, it is time to rethink the message. Technology requires professional judgment." Sarah smiled. "I've started using AI to help write listing descriptions." Many agents are. AI can be a great tool, but it doesn't replace your professional judgment. Every advertisement, regardless of how it is created, remains the responsibility of the licensee. Always review AI-generated content before publishing it to ensure it accurately describes the property and complies with fair housing laws, brokerage policies, and applicable advertising requirements. Technology is a tool, David explained. It isn't a substitute for professional responsibility. Continuing education never stops. Sarah looked around David's office. Every bookshelf contained legal updates, brokerage manuals, fair housing publications, and industry magazines. "You still study all of this?" David laughed. "Every week. Fair housing evolves. HUD guidance changes. Case law develops. Industry practices improve. The day a broker believes they know everything is usually the day they stop learning. I guess continuing education isn't just about renewing my license." Exactly. It's about protecting your clients and protecting yourself, building consumer trust. David explained that fair housing compliance is also good business. Consumers are more likely to recommend agents who treat every client with professionalism, respect, and consistency. Trust is built through fairness. Reputation is built through fairness. Long-term success is built through fairness. The agents with the strongest reputations, David said, are usually the ones who consistently treat every consumer with dignity and respect. One final question. As Sarah packed her notebook, she looked at David. "If you could give one piece of fair housing advice to every new agent in Arizona, what would it be?" David didn't hesitate. "Never decide what is best for your client. Provide accurate information. Present every available opportunity. Answer honestly. And let your clients make their own decisions." Sarah smiled. "That sounds simple." David nodded. "It is. And that's what makes it so effective." Arizona broker tip. Fair housing compliance should never be viewed as a separate part of your business. It should be incorporated into every listing appointment, buyer consultation, property showing, advertisement, email, and client conversation. When equal treatment becomes part of your office culture, compliance becomes a natural result, rather than an afterthought. Online discussion question 1. Why are consistent office procedures one of the best fair housing risk management tools available to a brokerage? Answer. Consistent procedures help ensure every consumer receives the same professional service, reduce the likelihood of unequal treatment, and provide documentation demonstrating compliance if a complaint is ever investigated. Question 2. Why should licensees carefully review AI-generated advertising before publishing it? Answer. AI is a valuable tool, but the licensee remains responsible for the final advertisement. Reviewing AI-generated content helps ensure that property descriptions are accurate, objective, and compliant with fair housing laws and brokerage policies. Question 3. How does fair housing compliance contribute to long-term business success? Answer. Consumers are more likely to trust and refer professionals who consistently treat everyone fairly and respectfully. Strong fair housing practices build credibility, reduce legal risk, and enhance a licensee's reputation within the community.